Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. And I see you doing some great work on the energy side, on five elements side, and creating a lot of awareness about the five elements, which is quite interesting to me as well. So we'll talk of all of that today, along with, how it makes a difference during different seasons. So,
Yeah.
but let me just first introduce you to the listeners, and I think we can take it on from there.
Okay.
So, Kimberly Ashton is a wellness coach. She's an energy medicine practitioner, a TCM food therapist, an author, and an educator specializing in energetic nutrition. Her specialization in food centers around power of functional foods, Chinese medicine, five elements, food energetics, emotional anatomy, cultivating chi, and balancing life energies. So Kimberly is doing a lot of retreats. She's educating yoga practitioners as well as various people from wellness industry, chefs, coaches, on this concept of five elements and how it actually matters when it comes to physical and emotional health. So welcome, Kimberly. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I think we'll start with a very basic question. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about food and the elements, so it's a great
Yes, I
opportunity
do.
on your show.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, so I was living in China. I'm currently in Australia, in Sydney, Australia,
Mhm.
and I'm from here. I was living though from about 2001 to 2019, which is a long time in Asia, mainly in China.
Mhm.
I was studying there, then I was working there, and then I had a few businesses there as well, including a health food
Mhm.
store and a cooking teaching classroom. So when I was there, I was really I had a corporate job, and then I jumped into wellness and health and nutrition.
Wellness. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
was a big jump, but I really, it was every part of me was saying I have to do it. So that's what I had to
Yes,
do.
I can resonate with that.
Yeah, I think many people can once you find your entry into health. A lot of people go through
Exactly.
yoga or nutrition as a starting point.
Yeah.
And I was learning about Western nutrition, and I loved it. But
Mhm.
I was in China at the time, and I had a acupuncturist who was a mentor of mine. She's a third generation TCM doctor,
Mhm.
and she was very big on food and emotions, and so that's kind of where my interests have followed along.
Mhm.
And so I was studying Western nutrition, but realizing there was a lot more to
Mhm.
what Western nutrition has to offer, which is fantastic. But there was an
Yeah.
energetic side with the elements, and
Mhm.
people who study Chinese medicine or even Ayurveda, they understand that there's more layers to food
Yeah,
than
exactly.
just the surface.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then I started doing health coaching. I had the store as well, teaching a lot of cooking classes, but very much based around the five elements. I also
Mhm.
came across a lovely teacher from Holland um,
Uh-huh.
who was big onto macrobiotics. So I went down the
Mhm.
path of macrobiotics and realized, wow, that five elements has even more layers in the kitchen and applications.
Yes. Yep.
So I really enjoyed that part, and then I feel like it's come like full circle. And
Mhm.
now I'm working more with the energy medicine as well as the food, because
Mhm.
there's always something emotional behind why we get sick or why we have imbalances in health.
True.
So yeah, so that's the short version of my
Perfect. And I
story.
just love what you do, the way you kind of interpret, physical and mental health and foods and organ systems
Yeah.
all of it coming together as a part
Yep.
of energetics. So I
Mhm.
think again, I'll start with the very basic. Your website is by the name Chi Food Therapy, right? So
Yes.
and there's a very deep meaning to that, like
Yeah.
food therapy using energy. So just
Hmm.
help our listeners understand what does actually food energetic
Yeah.
mean. I mean, how
Yeah.
can they for a normal person who just understands the modern nutrition or just knows about calories and
Hmm.
macronutrients, micronutrients, can actually understand this concept of food energy. Where do they
Yeah.
relate to it?
Yeah, definitely. So, Chi Food Therapy is energy and food therapy. So, when I started this brand after I came back to Australia in 2020, I knew
Mhm.
that. it was more than food for me. So I really wanted to share more about the energetics. So it's energy and food medicine and food therapies or modalities. So for the food
Mm-hmm.
part, food is energy, and we're all energy. We're as humans, we're energetic beings. Actually, we're more than just the physical body. We have our meridians, we have channels of energy, we have our organs. They're all alive and have energy in them, and different qualities of energy. So the types of food that we eat, but also the quality of food that we eat affects us on a physical, emotional, energetic layer. And food, if people have trouble with the word energy because it's not something we learnt in school, we can
Yeah.
think of, food grows, vegetables are an easy category, even, animals. They're all in nature traditionally. um,
Yeah.
in the grass, they're surrounded by the elements. There's the, air or water or sun, the
Mm-hmm.
soil that they grow in. So there is an energetic quality how food is grown, and when we eat certain foods, we get that energy too. That's the simplest way to explain it. um,
Mm-hmm.
and food can bring us up, it can make us happy, it can make us really heavy and,
And
and
we know
sad
that. Yes.
as well.
Yes. Most
Maybe,
people actually relate to happiness is for most people is food.
yeah, and different flavors, we can talk about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So our organs use energy to process the energy of food. So um,
Mm-hmm.
it's all energy at the end of the day, and that's what I really wanted to try and showcase and share with more people. So our organs absorb food, process, digest, and assimilate food, but also life that's in the food, and our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens, today, if you had a good day at work, that's also food, quote unquote food, that you have to process in your body. So what we're eating
Mm-hmm.
really affects how we feel, and that's what I wanted to bring together in Chi Food Therapy. I've always been big on
Mm-hmm.
education, so it's
Yeah.
it's very much an educational brand or platform,
Mm-hmm.
to share information with people so that they can learn, but also apply it in their own health.
Definitely, that's a great job that you're doing. So, okay, Kimberly. So today we'll be talking about importance of changing diets and seasons, which I think
Mm,
is a common concept that's shared among almost all Eastern ancient modalities. It's not a
yeah.
part of Western understanding. So before
Hmm.
we delve deeper into the seasons and organs and foods and all of that,
Hmm.
how can listeners understand the like why changing diets in different seasons is important at all? I mean, even if we
Mm,
keep the energetic side aside,
yep.
but there, there is something about different foods coming up in different seasons. How
Mm.
does it actually impact a person physically, emotionally, mentally when you live according to seasonal foods?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and not something we tend to think of traditionally in
Mm-hmm.
in Western
Mm-hmm.
nutrition. But
Yeah.
in every traditional culture, really, they understood, or they do understand, that there is a cycle or cycles. Even if you live in the equator and it's not huge, differences in winter or summer, there still is a change
Mm-hmm.
throughout the months and
Yeah.
the months of the year. In Chinese medicine or TCM, the elements are well understood, and even if you don't know much about five elements, which is fine, you'll feel there's a different flow, or your mood changes in winter or summer, or other
Yeah.
seasons. And some people love certain seasons. There's a reason, because their personality and constitution is more inclined for autumn or winter, or some people love spring or
Mm-hmm.
summer. So yeah, so this cycle can be applied to everything. And when we live in harmony with the outside world and the seasons, our internal body or landscape or our organs will flow as well. So if we think of it more as flow, it's probably easier to understand. And when we eat out
Mm-hmm.
of season, which is a good way to explain, answer your question as well. When we're eating out of season, then our body has to either compensate or step up, or there's a burden or a struggle to
Mm-hmm.
digest certain foods. It's also probably not grown locally. So if you're importing foods from somewhere far away, on the other side of the country, or these days we have a lot of imported food from other countries and across the world,
Yeah.
the body doesn't
Mm-hmm.
recognize what, this food from, I'm in Australia. If we're eating food from Europe all the time, it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to help benefit my health, because it's not from my natural surroundings. It's not giving me the information that my cells need and my body needs and my organ needs, because it's coming from another environment, another
Yeah.
climate, another country. So we
Mm-hmm.
used to all eat very locally and seasonally. but that has changed obviously with modern
Yeah.
culture. And
But
another,
seriously believe, like, for the newer generations who have actually seen these food stores where a host of different foods are available from all across the world and who do not actually are connected with these ancient sciences,
yep.
uh, accepting this fact that there is a limited set of foods that is sufficient for you for a specific season is a difficult concept. Do you think so?
Yeah, absolutely, because our taste buds have changed too. So we start to get
Mhm.
a taste for, I don't know, French cheese or
Yeah,
Italian pasta
exactly.
or whatever
Yeah,
it is, and we want more of
yeah.
that. So, and I
Yeah.
understand that, and it's not that I don't ever eat imported foods, but if you can keep it local and fresh, like even just your vegetables, to start
Mhm.
with, like the basics, that would be good. And if you have some imported things, it's okay. Um, we're living in different times, so we also have to adapt. But no, it's a
True.
valid point. Um,
Yeah.
and things like junk food, they're made from things from all over the world, made in the
Yeah,
cheapest possible factory that they could be made in.
true.
So if we can avoid
That's
those
true.
foods that aren't really food, that would already be one step into a healthier
Exactly. Yeah.
diet. And then I wanted just to
Okay.
share two other things on that, because
Yeah.
where in Chinese medicine we talk about the nature of the food, so the thermal nature. So when we're eating out of season, maybe it's too this might be a bit too advanced, but hot or cold, like there's different qualities of certain foods, and we want to have the body in balance in that season. So in winter we
Mm-hmm.
tend to eat more warming foods, building foods, and summer much lighter. We do this in Western culture too. We eat more salads, or we eat more roast dinners or
Yeah.
stews. So we already have this understanding. But in
Mm-hmm.
Chinese medicine, we can go a little bit deeper. And the last thing is just our body system, our immune systems as well. When we're eating out of the natural cycle or the natural seasons, then our body has to cope with that more.
Mm-hmm.
And we put a lot of burden on, especially our immune system, when we're eating things that the body's like, why are we eating ice cream in the middle of winter
Mm-hmm.
in a cold
Yeah.
country?
So, do you think that possibly is one of the reasons that during seasonal transitions
Mm,
and going beyond, for a lot of people, a lot of health conditions happen just at that
yeah,
cusp of transition
yeah,
between the seasons because your body is trying to deal with. So, the season is changing, but your diet is not
yeah.
changing, and it's becoming hard for your body to cope up with the similar diet that you have been
Definitely,
continuing.
yeah. That's such a great point. In terms of the autumn or spring seasons, we see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people with allergies or colds.
Yeah.
Definitely, because there's a change in the season outside, and
Yeah.
two things. So, if our body can't keep up with that change,
Mm-hmm.
then we're going to get sick. Because our it's called the Wei Qi, the defensive qi, the immune system,
Okay.
pretty much
Mm-hmm.
isn't strong enough. So external things will come in, whether it's you go
Mm-hmm.
outside and it's cold and rainy and you catch a cold. Like if some people go out
Mm,
and
yeah.
they never get sick because their immune system is strong,
Yeah.
and some
Yeah.
people go outside and all the time, they're very susceptible to that.
Yeah.
So that's important. And also
Mhm.
with the change in season, it's what you've done in that season or the previous season to build your
Mhm.
strength. When we talk about building health in Chinese medicine, it's not just the immune system; it's a big part, but
Mhm.
your blood, your organs, like the whole system.
Yeah.
If you don't rest in winter and you go all the way round to spring, summer again, and you
Mhm.
haven't looked after yourself, you haven't rested, then you're going to be depleted and tired and exhausted.
Yeah. So it's like building one season, building on top of the other. It's like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's like building blocks, yeah, and it goes round and round in this five
Yeah.
element cycle
So
or
every year
season.
you have an opportunity to improve yourself if you start to build
That's
the
right.
right foundation right now.
Yeah, and if you
Great.
skipped one
Yes.
winter, some people don't like winter, so
Yeah.
they go
Yeah.
go to an island and go and sit on the beach. That's
Yeah.
okay. But then the
Mhm.
next winter, you might you might have missed out on an opportunity to build your health,
Mhm.
and that will also possibly mean you're a little bit weaker. I say
Mhm.
that in a nice way. It's not like you're weak, but yeah, the
Mhm.
body accumulates information and strength and chi or energy in each
Mhm.
season. You can, of course, use things like acupuncture and food and herbs to help balance that, and that's where the practices come from.
Great. So,
Yeah.
Kimberly, when we talk of seasonal diets,
Mm.
there is a whole science behind it. So,
Yeah.
it's not just randomly that this concept has come up, like you eat this in this season. There's this whole idea of
Yeah.
five elements working at the back of it,
Yeah.
which most people don't know. I mean, they just know
Mm.
seasonal diets. This is a set of foods you should be consuming. This is not, but they don't understand what's the science that's coming along with it. So,
Yeah.
for again a normal person who just understands that the foods should change during seasons,
Hmm.
how can they kind of resonate with this concept of how seasons are bringing about changes in your organ systems,
Yeah.
or possibly going a little deeper in those elements, bringing in changes in your physical mental health, which is ultimately boiling down to changes in your organs.
Hmm.
And that is because you need to bring about changes in your food. So how can a
Hmm.
person in real life relate to these five elements during seasons?
Yeah, it is a huge topic. The five elements is
Yes, I
a
understand that. Yeah.
philosophy in
Yes.
itself.
Yeah.
So if anybody is curious, I mean, it's an open invitation. I think we both are love this topic. So I'm always telling
Yeah.
people, especially even in like I'm in Australia, it's a very Western um, mentality. We're open
Hmm.
to different practices and nutrition and ideas of health and wellness for sure. But it is new to most people that I meet. So
Yeah.
I would start with the basics and just, be open and curious. Oh, there's something called the five elements. It makes sense. There's, elements in nature, and it doesn't have to
Hmm.
be the five elements from Chinese medicine. Every, in Ayurveda, there's four, and in other
Yeah.
systems, there's, the three doshas, four elements. We're on in Chinese medicine is only on with
Exactly.
five.
It's the same concept. It's language is
Yeah.
different, but the concept is the same.
That's right. So if you start to
Yeah.
see, oh, it makes sense. It's actually quite logical. And once people understand
Hmm.
it, they go or start even to look into it. It makes sense. It's not
Mm.
actually that hard. It's just many layers to it. So
Yeah.
as you said, there's these elements in Chinese medicine. We have five. So we have water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. Metal is the one that
Hmm.
other systems don't have. They use air and ether and other things, but it doesn't matter the name.
Hmm.
It's just us living in relationship with the outside world.
Hmm.
Understanding that there's different cycles and different elements. So in the five element system, though, that underneath the five elements, there is an organ pair. So in each season, we should look after certain organs. Which also makes
Hmm.
sense. And you're seeing this a lot
Yeah.
happening in Western nutrition and Western health. More and more
Hmm.
doctors are actually
Hmm.
looking to Ayurveda and Chinese medicine for
Yeah.
insights. And I
I think
even see
even
them talk about it now.
the modern there's a different shift in the modern science also happening, where I think the stream of functional medicine is taking all these concepts
Yeah.
from traditional Chinese medicine but converted into a modern concepts of
Hmm.
modern medicine, and then articulating this concept, of course in the form of medicine, but the underlying ground principles are coming in from TCM.
Yes, I absolutely, and they're taking little parts of it to share
Yeah,
with people,
like the
and I think
pathways.
it's great.
Pathway system is nothing but the organ system channels and the meridian
Yeah,
channels, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Western doctors, and I'm not a doctor, but Western science is catching up. They're like, oh,
Yes,
the
for sure.
liver
Yeah.
is related with the gallbladder, and there's a line of energy, and so
I
it's
tell
like
you what,
yes,
yeah, I was working with a functional medicine practitioner during COVID
hmm,
times, and
yeah,
that's where I got this understanding that the concepts that this person builds on. I mean, of course, the approach to how you would be, bring about healing is more based on supplementation and correcting
yeah,
the diet and all, which I was working, of course, on. But when it was about concepts, this person was talking the same language which TCM talks about. So if he's talking about liver, he's getting back into understanding what is the pathway that's making you go through this,
uh,
this liver functionality, and we are going to, using these supplements and these food principles, we are going to clean up this pathway, which was
mm-hmm,
as similar as what I had studied, in the basics of TCM. So it made
yeah.
quite a lot of sense that science is catching up for sure.
Yeah, and there's just so much. I mean, in the past, it was almost like they didn't appreciate it because it was too simple or it wasn't scientific. But I
Hmm.
think we overcomplicate it sometimes. And
Yes,
with
yes,
with things like TCM and the elements, it's actually going back to the basics and then realizing the depth of the information, and then how
exactly.
fascinating it is that they even knew that there was all these meridians in the body, and
Yeah,
people can start to feel it. You can start to feel when you have acupuncture or when you eat some different food or when you add some herbs, you'll feel the difference. And that's the most
yeah,
important thing. Whatever disease label we call it, if you have a problem, you'll feel the difference and you'll feel that whatever it is. It's usually a blockage or an excess or deficiency. I know you want to talk a
Mhm.
bit about that
That is
later
my
as
next
well.
question.
That's the next one.
That's
Okay.
my next question.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but basically, we're all living out of balance.
Yeah.
In the
So I
past,
think
we come back to balance as much as possible.
Yeah. So I think just to give a direction to my question, I think it's better to relate it to excesses and deficiencies that you just mentioned. So, what I wanted to understand from the listener perspective is that,
Hmm.
say, at the back of it, you and I understand that it's about five elements.
Yep.
Maybe fire or water element is high or it's deficient, or
Yep.
and that's where it's manifesting into something which is ultimately showing up as a disease. But for a normal person, somebody who who lives from one season to other and
Hmm.
realizes that every season he goes through, say, some congestive issues like, say, sinus or some cold and flu, and this person knows that in the season change this is going to happen to me, and this person starts to accept this fact. I mean, I'm taking these real life examples because I've gone through such clients who have accepted this fact that
Yep.
whatever, maybe this is going to happen to me in during transition, so they kind of start living their life in that acceptance. But it's not like that. I mean, you really have to understand that it's not medication. It's just that understanding that you need to kind of break that cycle of what's not working for you and align yourself more to these elements. So
Hmm.
for such people, how would you explain this concept in terms of excesses and deficiencies, which
Hmm.
ultimately, of course, boils down to elements. But
Yep.
say, for example, somebody has high mucus conditions during transition times, or somebody
Mm,
goes through this low feelings or
mm.
transition feelings where the moods are tend to go up and down. From that perspective, how the five elements are playing around in the body, which is giving them those symptoms.
Yeah, definitely. So, at a really oversimplified explanation, an
Mm-hmm.
excess is, as the word suggests, too much. So, it could be too much of a certain food. It could be too
Mm-hmm.
much of a certain quality of food. Very simply, you could have too much
Mm-hmm.
sugar, or you could have too much chili or too much salt, or things like
So
that.
what is the definition of too much? Is it person to
Yeah,
person, or yeah?
definitely
I mean.
person to person. So, if it starts to affect your physical organ, that would
Mm-hmm.
be one. So if you have, sugar crashes, if you have, in Western nutrition, we
Ups and
talk
downs.
about insulin resistance and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just simplifying it. So if you have too much sugar and you start craving sugar, relying on the sugar, or addicted to the cookies and the chocolates and the candies and things like that, that's too much. It could be too
Mm-hmm.
much spice and chili food. So you start to feel very
Mm-hmm.
warm, or you start to have skin breakouts, or trouble sleeping. There's a lot of what we would say heat and fire going up. In
Mm-hmm.
five elements, we also have directions. I'm not going to mention, like, overcomplicate it here, but you'll
Mm-hmm.
feel certain things if you feel really spicy and hot, like you start sweating up in the upper part of your
Yeah.
body. If you feel very heavy and slow and lethargic, you feel very much in the lower half of the body. So if you have too much of something, and when you start to feel it, so if it's affecting your sleep or your mood or the actual
Mm-hmm.
organ, or you see a problem in the organ, some pain or discomfort, um, an acupuncturist would look for these signs and patterns if they were to see you and
Mm-hmm.
diagnose you. A deficiency would be something like, you could have a very weak immune system. If you are very tired all the time, with low energy and mood, slightly different in Chinese medicine. We would probably look at your blood, the quality and the state of your blood, as well as the flow of the blood. So then that would give us signs to which organ, an element, but which organ is needing
Mm-hmm.
help. Is it the kidney? Is it the liver? Is it the
Yeah.
spleen related with blood? So we have a lot of cross. Uh, like, we can connect the dots really well in Chinese medicine.
That's
Um,
interesting. That's very interesting.
people will come in. I'm not an
Mm-hmm.
acupuncturist, but I work alongside them. So you would see an acupuncturist.
Mm-hmm.
They treat you for a medical condition. They do the needles and things like that, maybe some herbs, but there's lifestyle things you can do in between each session to the acupuncturist or to the
Mm-hmm.
TCM doctor, and that's what I focus on with the food. So what are the foods that's making you feel so, hot and spicy, or heaty and restless, and you have an insomnia,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't breathe as well, or what are the foods that are making you, um, what are you eating actually that's making you chronically sick, or your immune system's not strong, or you're feeling lethargic and tired all the time. because the food and the emotion are very much connected. So they're good
I
signs to
agree.
see when you are not feeling it balance. And a lot of people, to be really honest, don't know what balance is. If I say, "Oh, we're just eating in to
Yeah.
feel harmony," they're like, I don't know what that means.
What's that? What's that?
I haven't felt that
True.
before. I'm always up or down,
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
the Western nutrition world is very confusing because there is so much
Mhm.
information, but it
Exactly.
doesn't tell you to just sit and feel into your body. Your body, you know best. I can't tell you what to eat. I can't tell anyone else
Yeah.
to. I can just make suggestions, but I always tell people, how do you feel when you eat, this, whatever it is, rice or bread or apples or whatever?
Mhm.
How do you feel?
Yeah.
Does it feel good? I don't know how you feel. You only know how you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of Eastern understanding of foods or life. Like Western medicine, of course, has done a lot of I mean, it's phenomenal. But the
Mm.
only thing that it doesn't focus on is how much is too much. Like the concept of
Yeah.
balance. I mean, if it is about supplements,
Yeah.
of course, calcium is good for us, magnesium is good for us, protein is good for us. But how much? And how
Yeah,
does it make you
exactly.
feel? That's
And
the missing link there, I believe.
definitely, I totally agree. And another point to that is in the Eastern sciences and the Eastern wisdoms, we see the
Hmm.
body as a whole. So we never isolate calcium. We know calcium and all the minerals are good,
Yeah,
but we put
it's
them
yeah.
all together, and we
It's
can.
also synergy of different things coming together
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
playing
Yeah,
around in you. Yeah,
yeah. We don't
great,
separate and isolate things.
great. So, Kimberly, my next question is like, why focusing on eating for energy
Mm,
versus calories can
yeah.
make a huge difference to one's physical and emotional health. And I think that's a very practical question because most people who are seeking diet changes just
Hmm.
understand this concept of calories. I mean,
Yeah.
they are not aware of concepts beyond that. And they cannot even, as you said, relate to this concept that there's a difference between living and feeling lively.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
how can eating for energy bring about that difference?
Yeah, so it's definitely more about the feeling,
Mhm.
and the observation. So see, if you change your diet or you add some foods in or take some foods out, see how you feel rather than counting things. I mean, some people love the accuracy or a really good recipe
Mhm.
or the detail and they want to track their food. That's fine. You can do that absolutely. But
Mhm.
if we are shifting the mentality from how many calories am I eating per day and counting them all, it takes the joy
Mhm.
out of eating
Spending time
personally.
just counting calories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I fully appreciate some people need the structure. So you do what you do you and do what helps you to start with. But if you
Yeah.
are interested in, TCM and the five elements and this side of food and nutrition, it is very much about the seasons and the energies of it and how you're feeling, how it makes you feel
Mhm.
is probably a better way to say it,
Mhm.
um, than counting. We've never count calories. It's more about feeling. You eat until you're full. And so for some people,
Mhm.
it might be a really big plate, and for some people, it's less. It could differ as well on your age and what you're going through in your life.
Mhm.
When I'm teaching or working, talking a lot and thinking a lot, I eat a lot more because my calorie intake is to fuel my body.
Yeah.
If I'm not, maybe, if I'm on holiday or in a quiet period, which is very rare for me, I won't eat
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
much. But I eat a
Yeah.
lot, and people are always saying, "Where do you put all the food?" I'm like, I'm consuming it, I'm using it. So I need this
Mm.
food because it's for me, it's brain food.
Brain. Yeah.
Um, we talk a lot about in Chinese medicine the spleen and the thinking mind.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly feeding my spleen physically, emotionally, and energetically. Because if I'm busy talking and writing or working, we're burning
Mhm.
through a lot of food or fuel or calories in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Mhm.
don't suggest personally counting calories. Or if you really love counting calories because that's what you're used to, start getting into the feeling sense as well. Start to when you
Yeah.
eat something, how do I feel afterwards? If I had this for breakfast today, oh maybe I'm hungry. An hour later, no amount of
Mhm.
calories will actually help you feel into that or think why. Because if you eat one thing for breakfast today and a different thing tomorrow, they could be the same calories on in a number,
Yeah.
but if you're eating pastries
Energetically, it could
and
be different.
brown rice porridge or
Yeah.
oatmeal, it's going to make you feel very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Kimberly, moving on to the seasons,
Mm.
now that I mean, like I'll talk from the perspective of where I am right now. So in Canada, like
Yeah.
we are moving more towards the fall season right now.
Yep.
So if we have to look at that cycle from the five element perspective, and if we consider that this transition, we are just on the cusp of this transition from towards fall season from summer. So
Yep.
how can a person actually relate to the energy outside in the environment and
Mhm.
the resonance of that energy inside our body, like what kind of feelings or what kind of changes they feel in their body with those shifts in the nature, and how
Yep.
should their diet or maybe lifestyle look like to be able to be aligned with this transition.
Yeah, no, that's great. And remembering, yeah, wherever you are in the world,
Mhm,
follow that season. So, if you're traveling,
mhm,
then follow the local season. So for, yeah, you guys up in the northern hemisphere coming into autumn and what we call the
mhm,
metal element, you don't need to worry too much about that, the term, if
mhm,
you're not so familiar with that. But recognizing that there are seasonal changes outside in the temperature, in the color of the leaves, in, the dryness in the air, that affects us directly,
mhm.
and you can have certain foods or herbs to help you mitigate the effects of that. It's not that we want to ignore that.
Dryness is I think that's an important point that you raised, because I think this part of the world actually,
Yeah.
I mean, since I have also moved in recently, I realized that dryness is something which is severe in this part of the
Mm,
world. It's like it's
yes.
killing. I mean,
Yeah.
so so
Yep.
how what is it to do with the kind of weather that we experience in in Canada, and once you like how you should be transitioning smoothly into the next season
Hmm.
while dealing with all these conditions that come up to
Yep.
at your level.
Yep. So what I would suggest broadly, and then I'll come back to the autumn
Mhm,
and dryness, but broadly, if you follow the five element cycle, and again, you can just
mhm,
start with the basics of what are the elements, what are the organs, what are the seasons, and then
mhm,
the next layer I would suggest is what we call them the six evils. They're not evil, but the six
mhm.
climate or external factors that are affecting you. And in autumn, it's dryness. In
Yeah.
winter, it's cold. In summer, it's heat or
Mhm.
overheating. Then you start
Yeah.
to connect the dots and go, oh, okay, yes. So my body needs to be balanced from the dryness of the weather outside. So
Mhm.
I would suggest eating more hydrating foods. Now, that makes no sense to somebody who doesn't know what it means, but things with lots of water
Mhm. Yeah.
content. So I know
Mhm.
people eat a lot of toast. I eat toast sometimes too, but we want to have less dry foods. And if you look at every
Mhm.
traditional culture, everybody's grandma or great grandma around the world,
Yeah.
they all had soup of some sort. Soup
Yeah.
in all seasons, but particularly in autumn, winter, they knew how to make really nourishing soups. They ate a
Mhm.
lot of hydrating vegetables. So I'm going to talk about things like parsnips, um, radishes, cabbages. They have natural content of water in them as well, and fruits as
Mhm.
well. So we have things like persimmons. I don't know what you call them over there. I think it's the same.
No, no, I think
There's
we have a
We have
similar
those
feel.
too, yeah?
Yeah,
They
by
have a
the
lot
same
of
name. Yeah.
yeah, they have a lot of, water in them.
Mhm.
In China, we use in Asia, actually, we use a lot of lotus root as well in this season.
Mhm.
Um, there are a lot of different vegetables or foods, that are, associated with the organ. So something like lotus root, if anyone's
Mhm.
seen a lotus root, it's connected, with all the other bulbs of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
lotus root, and then it has little holes in it, and so these little holes,
Yeah.
represent the lungs and our respiratory system. So the respiratory
Mhm.
system in Chinese medicine is associated with the lungs and the large intestine, which is the metal element. So each element has organs that are ideally looked after in that season. So for you guys, metal is
Mhm.
about an autumn, is about lungs and
Mhm.
large intestine. And the lungs and large intestine, both of those organs don't like dryness. Hence, the dry weather has to be
Yeah.
balanced. And food is a great way to do it. You can have, seasonal fruits for you guys would be like apples and pears.
Mhm.
At the end of summer coming into autumn. The end of summer is also the harvest season, so there's the most amount of fruits, vegetables, and foods available.
Mhm.
So really seeing what's local and seasonal. I always suggest going to like a farmer's market or somewhere where you can
Yeah. Okay.
have like fresh foods.
Yeah, of course that makes sense, and that's how you get to know like what's in the season.
Yeah, yeah. And then lastly, with
Okay.
the autumn is the flavor. So there's 5 flavors. Water is about, or winter is about salt, sour
Mm-hmm.
flavor in spring, spice and bitter foods in summer, sweet foods in what we call late summer or earth element, and the
Mm-hmm.
metal element is all about this pungency flavor. So things like onions, horseradish, different types of radish, they have a bit of a stimulating energy to them, so they make things
Mm-hmm.
move in your large intestine, which is what you want, and the lungs.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
accumulating mucus or any overly or anything that's left over from summer. So
Mm-hmm.
if you had a really wild summer of eating lots of food and partying and going crazy,
Mm-hmm.
now's a good time in autumn to bring your energy back down
Okay.
and keep it strong with yeah, some hydrating foods and movement in your food in
Mm-hmm.
the flavor. So yeah, pungent flavors of that nature are good to stimulate and keep things
Okay.
moving in your lymphatic system and your organs.
Okay. So, moving on to the next season, like once the
Mm,
fall, moves on towards winters,
yeah.
how would the transition kind of move from season to season to complete one cycle?
Yeah, so the metal is the fall is the completion. The metal element is all about the completion of of one cycle, this year's cycle.
Uh-huh.
So as we move
Okay.
into winter, as you guys move into winter,
Mm-hmm.
it will be the focus will shift. It'll get colder. It won't be as dry, and depending where you are, of course. But it just gets really cold. And what happens in that season is what we want to look after the kidneys and the bladder.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other organ pair. The bladder's a bit
Mm-hmm.
hard to for people to get their head around and look after unless you've had some sort of illness or a UTI, a urinary tract infection, then you know. But
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the kidneys, so I would suggest things to nourish the kidneys. We're always looking to nourish that whatever organ it is in that season. So for winter,
Mm-hmm.
it would be the salty flavor. Not to say you have too much salt, just having good
Mm-hmm.
quality salty foods helps with your blood
Mm-hmm.
and your kidney function. Um, I would recommend dark colored foods as well. So things like black sesame, black beans, kidney beans. If you're a meat eater, then the warming, we call them warming meats. Different meat
Mm-hmm.
has different qualities energetically as well. So things like lamb or beef, if you're a meat eater. If you're not a meat eater, then definitely look to the beans that I just mentioned, even black lentils, dark colored foods,
Mm-hmm.
black,
Dark
blues,
colored
dark
foods. Okay.
reds, purples, beetroot. I don't know how popular burdock is in Canada,
It is.
but
It is. It
oh,
is.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you go into any
Yeah. I
Asian
mean, but
store,
I
they
can tell
have
you
it.
one thing, like for a lot of these vegetables, like we're talking of even like not the most common ones or heard ones.
Yep,
I think I'm the only one going and buying all of these things. And sometimes when I'm getting the billing done, this person asks me, "Can you tell me what this is?" So it's
yeah,
quite funny. Like these people are working there for years. I mean, because nobody buys it, they're not even aware what's the name of that specific vegetable.
yeah. And if you can't get it fresh, you can get it dried. In Western nutrition and in herbal stores or health food stores, we have a lot of burdock tea. So
Yeah.
that it's good. The energy, I don't want to talk like too much or too off track for people if they're not familiar, but in winter it's about a hibernation and a downward energy. We want to come ground
Hmm.
ourselves. We want to. It's cold outside, so we stay indoors more. We want things that
Hmm.
bring that quality energy
That
in.
cozy feeling, that really
Yeah,
comfortable feeling. Yeah.
yeah, so root vegetables is a wonderful way, and in
Hmm.
every traditional culture, they understood that in different seasons you eat different vegetables, and in colder
Hmm.
climates in winter, there's definitely a lot more root vegetables. We haven't touched on cooking, but I would also cook differently in different seasons. So in winter,
Hmm.
definitely more slow cooking, more using the oven. Like you want to bring warmth into your food and your body
Hmm.
through that. You're not going to be eating. Some people do, salads the whole way through winter, but we don't suggest that in Chinese medicine, especially in Canada, as
Hmm.
it's so cold. Like
Yeah,
really
it's cool. Yeah.
having your warm stews, your warm food, slow cooking,
Mm.
and then lastly, dark things like mushrooms. So all of the mushroom categories are really
Hmm.
good. The darker, the better, as well.
Okay. So, Kimberly, like again, a relative question.
Mhm,
It's a very known fact in both traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda as well that
mhm.
the transition time is the time to detox. So,
Yep,
back in India, if I see, there are certain festivals coming up specifically during these seasons, which people understand as festivals, but like after learning a lot about TCM and Ayurveda, I realized that there's a cleansing significance to those festivals, like the kind of foods
yep,
that are recommended during that time of frame is different from regular foods that we consume, and it has a cleansing quality to it. So
mm,
from the detox perspective or cleanse perspective, what do you recommend? Like it's like twice a year when the major transitions happen, basically
mhm.
from winters to summers and summers to winters. And from the TCM perspective, how should your diet and lifestyle look like if for somebody who's really wanting to detox during those times?
Yeah, definitely those are the good times because you're coming out of a cold winter wherever you are, or even if it's not cold, if you
Hmm.
live in the tropical place, or if you're coming out of summer going into autumn. So they're a perfect opportunity to detox, or I don't really like the word detox. Detoxification's all right, but because
Hmm.
we've made it
Cleanse?
very trendy and people do it all year round and they want to do it every day or every
Yeah,
month, and so then we would
yeah.
call that depleting. If you're doing it too much, then you're depleting your body. Whereas in Chinese
I have
medicine,
another question
we
before,
want
like,
we want to
before,
build up.
sorry. Yeah. So before we move further, like, I just want to add on another question so that when you answer, you keep that thing also, as consider that aspect also.
Yep.
You talked very rightly about this concept of detoxification, which happens all year round for a lot of people. And it could be something like a 1 day detox or a 2 day detox or a 3 day detox where you're
Yep.
using these, majorly you're consuming a lot of juices and smoothies to kind of give that
Mm,
your body a cleanse. So how
mm,
does that kind of a cleanse that is happening any time of the year
yeah.
different from these seasonal cleanses, which is highly recommended in Ayurveda and TCA?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you are taking, I'm not against smoothies or juices at all,
Mm-hmm,
but I see
mm-hmm,
them being a little bit overused for the wrong
mm-hmm,
people in the wrong season, and depends on your
mm-hmm,
constitution. So if you tend to get sick a lot, or you have very weak digestion, or you have low iron, or any of these sort of conditions, um, you're not doing your body any good by weakening it. We would say weakening because the juices
mm-hmm,
and smoothies are good for cleansing. Absolutely, you lighten your diet for a few days or a week.
mm-hmm,
But what the juices and the smoothies are doing is not building your or fortifying your organs and your system. It's just what we would
mm-hmm,
prefer in Chinese medicine. So even when we do a
mm-hmm,
cleanse or a detox, it's not about stripping away things. It's about naturally letting the body remove what is excess but keeping
mm-hmm,
what's good. Whereas in the West, we tend to think of like detox as just clean, clean, clean. We want to get rid of everything, and I'm like, then you have nothing left. So that's the
True.
first difference. So
Mm-hmm,
yeah, the seasonal cleanses are more about getting back into balance than going
mm-hmm,
to one extreme, which unfortunately I see and or I observe in the Western
mm-hmm,
smoothie juice world. Some brands are
mm-hmm,
doing better, and they'll
mm-hmm,
add in some herbs. They work with a herbalist or a
mm-hmm,
naturopath or a TCM doctor so that you're building whatever it is, the large intestine or the colon, your digestive system, not just giving it ice cold things and stripping things away, because it can leave you feeling more depleted. And ideally, say in spring and in autumn, in a TCM way
mm-hmm,
of cleanses or detoxes, it's much lighter, it's much
mm-hmm,
gentler. They tend to
mm-hmm.
use vegetables rather than fruits, is a big
Yeah.
difference, big observation. And they use functional foods for this, and they're very
Mm-hmm,
knowledgeable on the flavor and the action or the energy of the food. For example, in spring, we would have a lot of green things, whether it's green
mm-hmm,
vegetables, um, certain herbs as well, and teas and tonics to clean the liver or help the liver after winter.
mm-hmm,
And then in autumn, we would have vegetables like I mentioned, the lotus root or the daikon or some barley, some Chinese barley. They all have a
mm-hmm,
really gentle cleansing effect. They remove oils, fats, excesses of heat in the body, in the system, and
mm-hmm.
it's a much milder cleanse than having 10
Okay.
green smoothies.
Yeah, so this is something like an ongoing kind of a cleanse, which is kind of
Yeah.
gentle cleansing you as well and building you as well, not just only creating depletion. Yeah.
That's right. And really, when you know what foods to have or herbs or flavors, you can do it. Like you said, it doesn't have, you don't have to wait until
Mm.
spring or autumn. And that's
Mm.
the beauty of the five elements. It's really getting you to trust your body and knowing what you feel. So if I'm feeling, you know, in the middle of winter, if I'm feeling, that I'm out of balance or I want to have a cleanse, I can do it, but I will
Mm-hmm.
do it through food, but not in a
Mm-hmm.
depleting way. So I'm not going to go to an extreme. I guess that's the fundamental principle is no extremes. We don't like to go to
Yeah.
just fruits or just water for
Mm.
for a long period of time. I mean, some people watching might be like, oh, but in the old days in the temples or
Mm.
people did do fasting. Absolutely, that's a different thing, and it's for a short period of time,
Mm.
but they will come
Mm.
back with wholesome food as well.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, with five elements, is about not going to too much extremes because that shocks the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I think that very deeply resonates with even with how Ayurveda brings in this concept
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
cleanse on a
Yeah.
regular basis and specifically during those transition times. So I
Yeah.
think, as you said, functional foods in Ayurveda, spices are used as like,
Yeah.
one kind of functional food to bring about those shifts in the body.
Yeah, and lastly, with Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, when we're talking about detox or cleansing, whether it's seasonal or whether because you're sick, it's a holistic approach. So they would do it
Yeah,
together with other treatments. You would have
yeah,
massage, you would have
true,
all the
true.
wonderful physical body work, acupuncture
Yeah.
as well, because they know you can't just do one thing and change the body,
Yeah.
like
No,
do it from
even
all
in
approach.
Ayurveda, I think like a lot of people have actually started combining yoga and Ayurveda together. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's becoming a part of as a way of life rather than only practicing yoga or only practicing Ayurveda.
Yeah, and which is what it was designed for
Yeah,
in the past.
exactly.
That's traditionally
True.
what it is.
Yeah.
If we can move the body with physical movement, exercise, but also breathing and food, then we don't have blockage, we don't have excesses, we don't have deficiencies. Like again,
Yeah.
it's all about this idea of balance, or
Mm.
coming back into balance as often as you can.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
Kimberly, like this is one curious question that I have for you. Coming from the place of yoga,
yeah,
it really, it was quite interesting for me to know that, you're teaching this concept of five elements in yoga retreats.
yeah.
So how are you, what kind of association is there between those five elements in terms of designing your diet and lifestyle, which resonates with the yoga practice? Because with yoga you are of course it's a spiritual practice if you're doing it the traditional way. You're already practicing a lot of cleanse kind of practices, doing all those kriyas, and then when you're practicing say different forms of exercising, of course you're indirectly working on your meridian channels also. Of course,
Hmm.
in yoga we don't use that term as meridian, we use the term as nadis, but
Hmm.
it's more or less again the terminology is different but the concept is the same. So
Hmm.
this concept sounded really interesting to me, where now it's kind of a level of filtration where possibly how in different seasons you bring in certain kinds of foods that strengthen your organ systems and then you practice yoga. Is it that kind of a concept that you talk about in your yoga retreats? How do you bring the two things together?
Yeah, that's that's a good question too. So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
passionate about the five elements and sharing it with as many
Mm-hmm.
people as possible. And a yoga audience is a very captive audience. They come. It's more
Mm-hmm.
like a wellness retreat. And we do
Yeah.
some yoga. I teach some other movement, like some qigong exercises, some
Mm-hmm.
simple ones. For most people,
Mm-hmm.
it's new. So I go about the theme. So my theme of the retreats that I host is one is called stress relief and one is called
Mm-hmm.
living with ease. So it fits in quite well with the five elements from the perspective of I introduce the elements to people and I do it through the lens
Mm-hmm.
of what is your predominant element. So understanding yourself better really is what
Mm-hmm.
I apply. I don't go into the
Mm-hmm.
food so much because it's too big a topic
Okay.
and overwhelm people. But if people can understand why they're more of a wood person, and they will like
Mm-hmm.
different types of yoga even, and a metal
Yeah.
person or a water person will like different types of movement or yoga as well.
Yeah.
When we
Yeah.
start to understand ourselves, I do a lot of the emotional side because of the theme of those two retreats that
Mm-hmm.
I host. So why people get angry and hold the emotions in their liver, and why some people go
Mm-hmm.
inwards and are more introverted. So by understanding through the lens of the five elements themselves better, they
Mhm.
can understand why they make the choices that they make in their life, why they talk the way or behave the way that they do. So in the retreat, I actually right now I don't talk about food, hardly. Maybe I
Okay.
mention the flavor,
Okay.
but it's mainly the level of the what are the elements, how are they
Understanding
affecting
your
it.
own energetics, basically.
Yeah, just learning about yourself more. And then I do have a slide where
Hmm.
in the 5 elements, I put just as examples different types of yoga. So yin
No,
yoga
no,
being more
that's great.
metal,
Yeah.
and Ashtanga or power yoga being more like wood, fire,
Yeah.
restorative yoga being very
More
water
young
element.
kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I
Mm.
use I introduce the energies of the 5 elements to people.
Specific practices. Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay,
just but
great.
mainly to understand themselves better. I think that's what we need.
Okay.
If we just understand ourselves better and that we're all different
Yeah,
and we feel different,
exactly.
food and emotions, then you can build on the food and the emotions.
True. Okay. Now, since we're talking emotions, I like, this is again coming from my practical experience working with different clients. In most of the people, one common thing that came up as a part of their personality, that most of
Mm,
the people have
yeah.
this morning time anxiety, specifically morning time
Mm,
anxiety, for no reason. Like, they wake up, if they don't have a plan in place or a schedule in place,
yeah.
the morning hours until it's like really sunny, maybe around 11 or 12, is where they start to settle down or ground into the day.
Mm,
But before that, it's too much of a rush, too much of overthinking, too much of mind not getting settled,
mm,
experiencing that level of anxiety. So
mm.
do you think it's that morning energy is somewhere related to the concept of 5 elements? And
Yeah.
are there any specific kind of foods or food practices that can bring about that settlement for a person during those hours?
Yeah, definitely. So there's something, and your listeners and viewers can look up is the 24-hour meridian clock or organ clock
Mm-hmm.
from Chinese medicine. It's a colorful wheel, and the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
principle is that every 2 hours in Chinese medicine there are certain organ times, um, which make again logical sense. So in the morning time is the earth element, which is the stomach and the spleen time. So
Mm-hmm.
breakfast time. So I know that intermittent fasters don't like to hear this, but in Chinese medicine,
Yeah.
especially for long-term health, you can do fasting, it's
Mm-hmm.
fine, in short term or detoxes or whatever you would like. But over the very long term, like, a few years, if you are not having breakfast and looking after the stomach and spleen, which is exactly what you mentioned, the emotions related
Mm-hmm.
to that are worry, anxiety, overwhelm. It's like a wiry type of energy,
Yeah.
and you just yeah it's and people may or may not want to eat if they're that anxious or worried, but actually having some food in the belly will
Mm-hmm.
calm and ground them. So the earth element is about this grounding energy. So you wake up and
Mm-hmm.
people like me, I'm a very strong wood element person, so I wake up and I want to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very busy,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I also need to take a few breaths, have like a proper
Mm-hmm.
breakfast, and calm down, because otherwise if you just wake up and go with that anxiety energy, then yeah, you'll crash somewhere. Usually people crash in the afternoon and then they want some sugar because they have no energy.
Yeah.
But so I would suggest, if you are feeling very anxious and overwhelmed and jittery in the morning, having something for breakfast is a good idea. Maybe not first thing is to have coffee, and people who drink coffee don't like to hear this either. But a lot of TCM doctors I'm seeing, even on social media and Instagram, they are even talking about this now. Don't have coffee straight away. Have coffee
Yeah.
10 o'clock, 11 o'clock if you really want it
Mm-hmm.
then, but have something in the
Mm-hmm.
belly in your stomach to bring your blood sugar into a stable place, which is very important
Mm-hmm.
for the stomach, spleen, and also the pancreas, so that you have this nice stability throughout the day. So a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't eat breakfast, or they eat very sugary, crappy foods for breakfast, or
Yeah.
that doesn't ground you and give you the sustenance and the energy that is what the earth element needs, which is the stomach and the spleen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you some
Okay.
examples. Most traditional cultures have some sort of warm thing for breakfast. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a porridge or an
Yeah.
oatmeal, or even if it's bread, but it's usually warm. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
ice cold smoothie bowls, which is
Yeah.
very trendy
And
at
it's
the
not like
moment.
ready to eat kind of stuff. Like, you just pick it up and
No.
start eating. It's not like that.
Yeah, it's not McDonald's, it's not Starbucks, it's not sugar.
Mm-hmm.
It's real food. And so if you
Mm-hmm.
can have something, it doesn't have to be big, but just something small and nourishing and warming. If you can find foods that
Mm-hmm.
bring you that quality, that's what we need. And if in doubt, look to the traditional cultures, what did they eat? People
Mhm.
eat eggs, or omelets or things like that. Great, like eat something that's going to give you the fuel that you need for the day.
Mhm. Okay. And do
Yeah,
you recommend smoothies? Like, I know
yeah,
you have a book on smoothies, yeah,
yeah,
in digital Chinese.
yeah. It's
So
an
that
old book.
that was again very interesting for me, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
my yeah, we don't in Chinese medicine traditionally, there's no the concept of
mhm,
smoothie, like putting cold things in a
mhm,
blender is very
mhm.
foreign.
No.
However,
Mhm,
I do have a book because my TCM doctor and my mentor, Dr. Zhang, she has written a few books, and her publisher asked her to write a book on smoothies because it was so trendy
yeah, because that's a
overseas.
yeah trendy. Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
she's like,
that's quite interesting concept. Sounds like medicinal smoothies.
they are, yes. So it's funny because so she asked me to help co-write the book. And so I wrote the recipe.
Mhm,
She wrote some like comments from a TCM
mhm,
doctor perspective.
mhm,
And I deliberately tried to, well, I did not put avocado, banana, or ice
mhm.
in the whole book
Ah, okay.
because, and so that people are like, that's not a smoothie. I'm like, no, because a smoothie is a
Mhm,
blended substance. So we use a
mhm,
lot of traditional foods and simple things like we made teas first. Like you could make a green tea
mhm.
or a chamomile
Yeah,
tea, use that as a liquid to
as a
make your
base.
smoothie.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no ice, because in Chinese medicine we really don't like
Yeah,
ice. It shocks the
cold. Yeah.
spleen. Yeah,
Mhm,
it's cold and it shocks the spleen and it disables the digestive system. In Ayurveda, actually,
mhm,
there's a wonderful word I like to cross reference, and we don't have this word for digestive fire,
mhm.
which is Agni. If you don't have the
Yeah.
strong digestive fire, which is in this earth element, the spleen and stomach, you can't
Mhm.
digest life and emotions
Yeah.
and food. It's just your
Mm.
fire is out. You don't have energy or life and vitality
Yeah, yeah.
so much. So that's why I skip the ice in the smoothie. So room temperature. Um, I also have something called mountain yam or shan yao, and if you blend that up,
Mhm,
it's really creamy. So I look to a lot of alternative things like tubers and root vegetables that are cooked, are soft, to get the
mhm.
thickness.
Okay.
And yeah, a lot of herbs, goji berry, and fruits and things like goji berries. Warming things like cinnamon, cooling things like mint. So just using some basic
Mhm,
principles. The ingredients aren't too foreign, but yeah,
mhm.
it was a fun project and concept because you can have the idea of a drink, a warm drink blended.
Mm.
Sorry, it doesn't
Yeah.
even have to be warm, but just not iced. Um, so I'm not against smoothies. I think they're a good concept, or even like smoothies or protein shakes or drinks, as long as
Mhm.
it's as a supplementary thing and you're still eating
Yeah.
well.
Your main
Um,
foods. Yeah.
yeah. So, and for the right person in the right season. So I definitely wouldn't recommend them in winter, especially in Canada, with ice.
Yeah.
But in summer, on a
No,
hot
definitely. Yeah.
day, why not? Why not have a smoothie? I personally would have it
Yeah.
later in the day, like 10 or 11 or afternoon. I
Mhm.
don't have them first thing in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. And I think my last question to you is going to be, how do your meals look like?
Yeah. That's a good question too. Lots of good questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
So for me, breakfast is always warm. It can be sweet or savory. It doesn't.
Mhm,
I go with what I feel, and a lot of people like to eat one thing for breakfast, and some people will eat the
mhm.
same thing all year round, every day, and that's fine. But I need a
Yeah.
bit of variety. I don't like
Mhm,
eating the same thing. I get bored. So usually
mhm,
warm. So this morning I had oatmeal with cinnamon and walnuts
mhm.
and pumpkin seeds. I really like savory breakfasts, like a rice or millet porridge, and millet is something that I really wish more people would eat in India and in China. It's
Yeah.
a very
It's one of
traditional
the main
grain.
foods, becoming a main food now. Yeah.
It's
But
coming
there's
back
a
in
lot of
fashion.
yeah, and it's like the millet varieties are like endless. I mean, so
In
how do you
India, they are.
experience this?
In China, just
Is
the
it like
yellow one. Yeah.
oh, we have a lot of
Yeah.
variety. Rather in Canada also, I see a lot
Yeah.
of not
Oh,
as much as we have in India, but in Indian stores in Canada, I find variety. Like at least 7 to 8
nice.
different kinds of millets I do find here.
Wow. That's
So
great. Yeah,
yeah,
we don't have them in
yeah.
Australia, but
But then I get confused. Is it like I bring in all that variety, or I just stick to two or three or four, which kind of which
Mm,
I
I
recommend?
like the variety. So if you can have different colored millet, which there
Mhm.
is, there's white, yellow,
Yeah,
different shades of brown
yeah,
from India.
yeah.
In China, it's just yellow. They have different types of the yellow millet, but it's still yellow.
Hmm.
Um, because it just never got as popular with the others. But because in India you use them in different ways. You make
Yeah.
puffs, you make flour, you make
I ferment it. I ferment the batter and
fermented.
then I make them.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's very tasty. I mean, those complex flavors are so satiating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're missing, the complex flavors. I know we didn't talk so much about
Yeah,
flavor, but we tend to, in Western, food, cafes, restaurants, or even cooking, we have a lot of sugar
yeah,
and salt. We're just eating those two. That's it. We don't
yeah.
have the fermented flavor. We don't have the sour flavor, the pungent flavor. We're
Mhm.
missing a lot of flavors and we don't feel satiated. So therefore we eat snacks and junk food.
Exactly.
But to get back to your question, yeah, I like variety. So as long as it's
Mhm,
you're mixing it up, so you're not eating the same thing. The body likes a bit of variety,
mhm.
is good. And then yeah, millet porridges are good. You can make them sweet or savory. If you're not sure what millet is, you can look it up, but cook it as like a rice, and you can make it dry and
Mhm,
fluffy or like oatmeal and thick and creamy. It's up to you.
mhm.
I also really like pancakes of any kind, whether it's buckwheat pancakes or chickpea flour
Yeah.
pancakes. I love
Mhm,
pancakes and wrapping things a lot. And for me, lunch and dinner, if it's like a day of what I eat, for me it's about the same. Like I don't separate what lunch foods and dinner foods are.
mhm,
I'm not a big sandwich person. I mean, I like sandwiches, but I just don't have much to
mhm.
put in a sandwich. I don't eat a whole lot of meat, so yeah, so I tend to have a lot of like warm salads if it's summer, like roasted vegetables and some salad leaves.
Mhm.
I do really like Asian food, as well as Western food, but so I really like curries or noodles or rice and beans and tofu. Like
Mhm.
gravitate more to the Asian foods. In summer I will have more salads though. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, not cold from the fridge either. So I tend to take food out if it's a salad, like
Mhm.
the vegetables,
Yeah.
leave it out for a while, and then I'll make my salad. I don't eat it. I don't eat anything straight from the fridge. I used to, and I had a lot of
Mhm.
digestive problems, and then I
Okay.
changed that, and it changed
Yeah.
everything.
Great. So, and just on the ending note, what would you want to recommend some common foods from anybody's pantry which they should be
Yeah.
consuming every single day, which
Yeah.
act as say functional foods or medicinal foods?
Yeah, I think you can do a lot in the grain section and the tea section.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're pantry, so I know a lot of people, especially in the West, have this myth against grains, but and carbohydrates. But we really need to be quite specific about what that means because we can't
Mm-hmm.
say all carbs are bad or all
Yeah.
grains are bad because there's some really good ones. Black rice
Mm-hmm.
is, if you have never tried, actually millet is really good. I would suggest to people try millet and some black rice. Like
Mm-hmm.
go find those foods because they have functional properties. The millet's really good for the spleen. It's like the spleen's best friend. Therefore, it
Uh-huh.
strengthens your digestion and all of things like IBS, food allergies. They're all in that earth element. And then black
Mm-hmm.
rice is really good for blood. And a lot of people are what we call blood deficient or energy or chi
Mm-hmm.
deficient. They get very tired very easily. They don't think really clearly. For women, it affects our menstrual cycle as well if we don't have enough blood. So things that are
Mm-hmm.
dark colored is a thing that I see people are missing. So black sesame and
Uh-huh.
black rice. And then for teas,
Okay.
because again, it's easy. You can go to a supermarket and get them, or you can go to an organic store and get better quality teas. But
Mm-hmm.
start to learn about different teas. If it's hot, have some cooling tea like peppermint tea. In winter, have some
Mm-hmm.
burdock tea or I'm a big fan of red raspberry leaf. It's not so much. Oh, it is in Chinese medicine too.
Mm-hmm.
But start to have seasonal teas. If you don't cook, start with tea,
Yeah.
because you can do a lot physically and energetically in the organs and the body by having different herbs and
Please.
different foods. Yeah, and
Yeah.
teas. Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Great. Great session, Kimberly. I'm still trying to absorb whatever you've told. It's like phenomenal information you have. So, on the ending note, is there anything else that you would want to add on before we end the session?
Just to encourage people to, yeah, just to start, looking at five elements. I often get
Hmm.
asked about books. There's not that many books compared to Western nutrition or even
Yeah.
Ayurveda,
So, why don't
but
we
there
talk
are
about
some.
your, your website and what you do, the courses
Yes.
that you offer if somebody gets interested in learning more about it?
Yeah, so I start with the your predominant elements. So I have a webinar on
Mm,
that if you're interested in learning which is your predominant elements and learning more about the
mm,
elements, as
mhm,
well as a 5 element and cycles short course. If you are
mhm,
interested in like plant-based nutrition, I'm not strictly vegan or vegetarian, but I go more on that
mhm,
side. There's a wonderful course on boosting your chi, so boosting your energy if you want to remove more, like if you want to go more plant-based. And then next year, I'm
mhm,
launching a 5 element nutrition course, like a full certification course that I'm writing with some
mhm.
acupuncturists. So that won't be out till next year, but really go deep diving into 5 element nutrition because I don't see a course like this out there. There's a lot for Ayurveda,
Yeah,
there's a lot for paleo or
true.
keto or vegan diets, but nothing about the elements. So I think it's time
Exactly. And
to share with
that's
more
what I
people.
love about your profile. Like, you're actually going back to the most basic thing that actually exists and, creating everything from that source.
Yeah, getting back to the basics and understanding the elements.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, if
great.
anybody's interested, yeah, chifoodtherapy.com. So chi is QI, foodtherapy.com, and same on like Instagram where I
Yeah,
share
I'll
most
mention that
things
in
there.
our bio as well, so people can just go
Yeah,
and search more about you.
that would be great. I
Great.
would love to, yeah, connect with people and yeah, just help share this information about the elements. I know we both love them so much, but
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
but for
great.
a reason. They bring benefit. I felt the benefit, you felt the benefit. When you start to
Yeah.
change small things in your diet, you'll see the difference and feel the difference for sure.
It's a huge transformational shift. We don't realize it, but once you get into it, you realize how everything starts to change for you.
Yeah. Yeah, your food, your
Mhm.
changes, your emotion changes, your sleep changes, like it's all connected.
Exactly.
So yeah, you definitely
True.
get a lot of benefits.
Great, Kimberly. Thank you so much for sharing such phenomenal information with us and, sparing time for this. Thank you so much. And I'd really look forward to, having more sessions with you, maybe, on different topics going forward. But thank you for this,
Yeah.
for this session today and sharing your valuable knowledge with us.
My pleasure. It's such a pleasure to talk about these topics. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye bye.